These are the stories of Careblazers, the stories of husbands, wives, sons, and daughters whose world is forever changed since caring for their loved one with dementia. You'll hear stories of heartbreak. You'll hear stories of love. These stories are real, raw, and powerful. I hope these stories show you you're not alone, and I hope they give you some inspiration and help as you go through your caregiving journey.
Micky, thank you so much for being here with us today and for taking the time to share your story. Take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you cared for.
Hi, Micky. My real name's Michelle, but everybody knows me as Micky Major, and I cared for my husband, Don. 7 years from when he was diagnosed in 2014 until he passed away this past December 7th of 2021. It was a long haul. His final diagnosis, original diagnosis was Alzheimer's, but he was a couple of years into it, was switched to Lewy Body dementia, and which I had never heard of. And actually the only dementia I had ever heard of was Alzheimer's. And so I think that it's, when he was diagnosed, it was such an abrupt diagnosis, and it was like, okay, well, there you go home and I'll see you in 6 months. My husband was a dentist. So we had sold our dental practice and he was still working, and he retired in 2013. And we never fought. We always got along really well. We had what was called starter marriages because we each had come from previous marriages, but we had been together, well, when he passed, for 30 years. So anyway, when we retired, he was starting to get very picky with me and very cranky, and everything was my fault. Even down to some personal sexual things. Well, it's your fault. This is your fault. And of course, I started to believe it. And he was just fighting with me on a lot of little things, nothing really big. We were doing renovations. Well, I don't like this and I don't like that. And okay, fine. So I went to our doctor. I said, I think something's wrong with Don. And they said to me, my doctor said, well, he's due for a checkup. So when he comes in, I'll check. He did a test called a CogniView, which was like a giant, like, computer type of pinball game, or I don't know. It was like different things. And he never said anything to me, but he said, I think you should go see this doctor. And he gave me his name, and I'll make you an appointment. So we got there and I looked at the sign and it said neurologist. What is this? All right, fine. We went in. We spent a half an hour with this man who we had never met before. And the doctor did a mini memory test, gave us the 5 words, which I had never heard of before. And Don only knew one of them. So the guy went out of the room. He comes back with a prescription pad and says, well, I'm really sorry to say, but you have Alzheimer's and I want you to take Aricept. So here's a prescription and I'll check back with you in 6 months.
Wow.
Period. End of story. It was really nice meeting both of you, and I'll talk to you later. Wow. And so we went outside, and yes, we made the appointment. And from that day forward, Don had some very choice, let me say, salty words to describe the doctor. Now understand, my husband, being a dentist, has a medical background, and we never discussed it again. It was not a subject that he ever chose to discuss. And we didn't. So our physician called me the next day and said, so you saw Don, I forget his name. And I said, yeah. And he said, so what did you think? I said, well, what do you mean, what did I think? He goes, well, I knew once I saw the results of the test, and I talked to him, I shared it with him and stuff. And I said, well, what should I do? I have no idea. My only experience with Alzheimer's, yes, we had patients that I had this naive idea that I would wake up when we were in our 90s and he would roll over in bed and not know who I was. And he was 69 at the time, and
Oh.
I'm 7.5 years younger. So I was like, you're kidding. And we had just retired a year before. And my doctor said, do you really want to know the truth? And I said, yeah, I do really want to know. He said, get a divorce. And I said, excuse me? He goes, you just have no idea what you're in for. You're too young to go through this. I would suggest you get a divorce. And I went, I don't think so. There's got to be another answer. And at that point, I hung up the conversation. I think I only saw him once or twice after that, because it just couldn't get past your doctor telling you something like that. Well, years went on, and for several years, he was okay. And he went through the Aricept. He couldn't take Namenda for some reason. If he had some wine, he would get wacky. And I was starting to look everything up online. There's no contraindications. But anyway, so we went on, and this was in 2014, and we were scuba divers. We led a charmed life. We were lucky. We traveled all over the world doing underwater photography. We had a boat. But now that I look back on it, there were things that my husband said and did. I think he knew, but didn't want to discuss it. Maybe he didn't want to put it on my shoulders. He didn't want to make me scared or whatever. But we ended up purchasing a house in Florida. We're from New Jersey. We purchased a house in Florida. We were snowbirds. And in 2016 into 17, we took a dive trip, and it became apparent to me on that dive trip, this was the last one. Thank God we were with friends who handheld him. He would forget to turn his camera on. And that's when it started really hitting home. So no more dive trips. So we ended up, we had purchased a house a year before. So we were just spending time in Florida and doing our trips. And Don started leaning. And I think this was the first indication. I had no idea what it was. Maybe if, I got to say, none of the doctors, nobody in New Jersey said a word to us. It was kind of like, come every 6 months and get your prescription for Aricept. And now that I look back on it, it was like we were kind of like thrown out there to figure it out. And he started leaning, and we were both people. So I used to call, and even our friends, they would go, Don, you're listing. And I didn't realize, but I think that, in my opinion, that was this Lewy Body. He was starting to have motor skill problems, but I didn't know this.
Right.
He was a runner. He used to fall. He would fall. And then he would tell me that it was my fault because I bought him the wrong kind of sneakers. They got caught on the ground, or we went down the wrong road. And so there were all these different things. And in 2017, which was the last time I saw the doctor, he had said to me, your husband is in late stages of dementia. Now, he never mentioned Lewy Body. And I'm like, late stage? What are you talking about? He was still driving. We were going out. I mean, yes, there were issues. Now that I look back on it, there were more issues. He said, I think you should consider having him in on an assisted living facility. I said, well, there's no way. And that was really the last time I saw this doctor, because I said, yeah, no, not doing it. Well, January of 2018, we were in Florida, and Don took a huge nosedive. He woke up one morning, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, he had no idea where he was. I didn't know. I was like, what's going on? And we were supposed to go to my sister's the next day, which we did. And when we got there, my sister said, oh my God, he's having a stroke. You know, he doesn't know where he is. And I'm like, Barb, he'll be fine, you know, and he was not fine. And so the next morning at 6 o'clock, I woke up, I brought him back to our hometown here in Fort Myers, Florida, and went straight to the emergency room. And thank God, those doctors there, who we didn't even know, recommended us to Lee Memory Care, which is in Fort Myers, Florida, which is an amazing, amazing group of people. We made an appointment. First of all, they said 4 or 5 months down the road. They got us in within a month. Okay, so now it was the neurologist, the neurosurgeon, Of course, all of the scans, the cognitive testing, hours of testing, hearing testing. None of this had been done in the 4 years since he was diagnosed in New Jersey. So it was, they even told me, Anna, that they thought he might have, something pressure in,
Normal pressure hydrocephalus.
you got it,
NPH.
because when they did this brain scan, they originally thought that could be what it was. We went to the neurosurgeon. No, it wasn't. So now we did this whole battery of testing. And it was at that point that they said to me, they believed that his problem was Lewy Body.
Yeah.
Because now he was starting to exhibit a lot of, what do you want to call it? Like the aggressiveness. He was getting very angry. They told him he couldn't drive. So of course that was my fault, because you must have said something to the doctor. So he was constantly trying to hit me and grab my arms like this. But I just kept saying he's not violent, because he never tried to hit me in the face. I'm like, yeah, wow. It's like the memory care people told me, if you're going to keep him at home, you need to hide all your knives. And you need to hide all of your screwdrivers. And I'm like, excuse me? And I don't really think so. This is my husband. He would never hurt. Yeah, and then they give you books and stuff. Well, anyway, make a long story short, I went back to New Jersey with Don in June of 2018 against the doctor's wishes. They had said to me, I don't think it's a good idea to take him back to New Jersey. You may not get him back to Florida. I said, we had a house in Jersey and a house. I said, I need to put one house up for sale. I can't keep both of them. And the Lee Memory Group said, I think you should put him in respite care in Florida. I said, I refuse to do that, because we don't know anybody in Florida. I mean, we were new to the area and stuff. I said, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. I'm not going back to New Jersey. They go, well, can't you deal with this in 2 weeks? I said, a house you've lived in for almost 30 years? No, I don't think so. So anyway, we went back to New Jersey. We put our house up for sale. And I said to Don, I think we should just sell the house. And he's like, I agree. I don't like New Jersey. It's too cold. I said, you're right. So we did put the house up for sale. But within 2 or 3 months, he went like this. I could not leave him alone. He started falling, getting more aggressive. I had to have somebody stay with him, but he wouldn't allow me to have any help in the house. I'm like, Don, I need to get some help. There's nothing wrong with me. And he would yell and scream. And it wasn't Don. But it's hard to get, constantly battered on. And, so I did hire somebody who was a friend and who spent a lot of time with him while I was packing. Don took another real nosedive. It was August 6th of 2018. I said to him, stay in bed. He was fully incontinent by this time. And so that was another thing, because there was no other caregiver. I was it. I had a housekeeper that came once a week to clean my house, but that was it. So at 3-4 o'clock in the morning, when there's messes on the bathroom floor, a couple of times I even slid on it, because you don't know when you get up. Anyway, I woke up this morning. I said, I have a doctor's appointment. I need to, I'll help you get showered and dressed, and we'll go. I had a dermatologist appointment. It was a Monday morning. And I said to him, so just stay in bed. And I couldn't find him when I got out of the shower. I was wrapped in a towel. I went to look for him, and we had stairs at our house, lots of them. I thought he fell down the stairs. And I went into our closet, and he thought he was in the bathroom. And I went, and I had already learned through, you don't go, oh my God, what are you doing? You can't do that. And I'm like, okay, no big deal. Hey, Don, why don't you come? Let's take a shower together, and stuff like that. I got him cleaned up. And whenever we walked down the steps, I had to walk with my hands in front of him in case he fell. And I would wedge myself so that I wouldn't tumble down. Got him downstairs, and I said, come on, we're going to go. And this was my mistake. I said, we're going to go to the hospital. And he said, I am not going any. I start yelling, screaming. And I said, yes, you have to go. I said, I think you have an infection. And and he started to try and come after me, but I could move faster than he did. I called my neighbor, who was 88 years old at the time. She came over, little bit of a thing, got up in his face and said, if you so much as take one step towards her, you're going to mess with me. Anyway, we got him in the car, got him to the hospital. By the time I got to the hospital, he was trying to hit my arm and yell at me and scream at me. The triage right there, I think they took over immediately and said, leave him with us. You go park the car right there. And I came in, and within half an hour, there was a social worker came to see me and said, okay, we need to talk, and stuff. And they said, you do realize, so this was after now some testing and interviews with me and getting the doctor's reports and everything like that. They said, you do realize that he cannot go home with you. And I went, no, I didn't. After 3 days, he couldn't walk. He was in a wheelchair. He spent 3 days in a hospital. I don't know what went on. I do know they tested him for Parkinson's, and the neurologist in the hospital said he does not have Parkinson's, but he's in a wheelchair. We don't know what the problem is. But see, the problem in New Jersey is the minute the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, it was like, okay, he has Alzheimer's, we're not dealing with it. So after 3 days, the social worker said, we're going to keep him for 3 days and do testing, but then he's going to need to go to a subacute rehab. And I said, okay. And they said, because it will be covered under Medicare. They gave me a list of rehabs, and they told me we need to discharge him by noon. This was at 8:00 in the morning when I got this call. They said, I'm going to give you this list. You need to tell us where you want him to be sent within 4 hours. And so I had two friends of mine. One was a hospice nurse. We went to several facilities, and it's amazing because I said, well, I want a rehab. For some reason, he can't walk. You need to get him to walk again. Right. Figure it out. And a lot of these places wouldn't take him because the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, the first thing that they would do when they looked at the paperwork, they go, I'm sorry, we don't have a lockdown facility. He's an elopement risk. I said, what do you mean he's an elopement risk? He's in a wheelchair. I mean, yeah, right? Okay. This one facility did take him. And after about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks in doing rehab, they came to me and said, we are not going to be able to recertify him for Medicare because he has Alzheimer's and he's forgetting how to walk. That's what the problem is. And I'm like, no, that's just, that can't be right. And they took him off of Medicare, which meant that now I started paying $300 a day. And at that point I realized I got to make some long-term decisions on this. It's just, and it happened so quickly. And I said, okay, well, my first decision is I'm not staying in New Jersey. The long-term care facilities, just generally speaking, $11,000 to $13,000 a month in the area it was astronomical. And I went to several of them, and I would not have put my cat in there. And in Florida, I had already had a deposit from earlier in the summer at a beautiful facility, which was $6,000 a month. And so I said to myself, well, $6,000 is better than 11 to 13. I don't know how long we're talking, because nobody could give me any, and none of this is covered under insurance. So, and we did not have long-term care insurance, but I was blessed that I could afford to take care of my husband the way he deserved it. And so I, with the help of some friends, got him on a plane in September of 2018. He was still in a wheelchair, and we came to Florida. And the facility that I wanted to put him in was not open yet. It was brand new. So I had to put him in an interim facility, which he hated. I didn't like either, but it was clean. It was nice. Everybody was nice, but it was just like my first experience with this. But one thing I have to say is that their PT people got him walking again. So from September till Christmas, he was walking again, and I have to give them kudos. And he moved into the long-term care facility in January called Amavita here in Fort Myers. He was their first resident in memory care. The facility could not have been more beautiful. I mean, they had 4 restaurants, 2 movie theaters, tennis courts, putting greens, 4 swimming pools, but a lot of it. But we could go to all the restaurants, and it was really great for the first. He moved in there of January of 19. Unfortunately, by I guess Thanksgiving of 19, his motor skills had started to deteriorate, and that was, I didn't realize it at the time, but on the downhill swing, and he was back in a wheelchair by Thanksgiving of 19. And when I look now at pictures, you can see the decline in his face. When he was in the facility, was there 5 to 6 days a week. So I didn't see it. Friends that came, they saw it. I now see it in pictures, but I had no clue. And then on top of that, we have in March of 20, COVID. So I have to give kudos to the care facility, even though I was on the warpath constantly with them. I was told I was a helicopter wife. Had no idea what that meant, but hovering over, and I guess I was. But I could not see my husband in person from March 13th of 2020 until the end of September. Amavita shut down all in-person visiting, but I have to say, and September 25th was the next time I saw him in person, but I saw him every week through the windows, through the big plate glass. I could then see the decline because I was only seeing him weekly. And, you're talking through a phone and he's hitting the phone and he's like, you're not talking to me, like he couldn't equate and stuff. But I have to say, the facility that my husband was in did not have one resident case of COVID during that entire time. So it was phenomenal. But he declined really a lot. Do I think part of it had to do with COVID? Absolutely, I do. I think that when somebody is not really, I think the aides, and they can only do so much. And even seeing me once a week, that's a difficult thing. But hey, there's nothing I could do about it. And then we were going along. I could only see him once a week. That was their requirements. They were very strict. Mask 6 feet, and put the 6 feet apart. I went, yeah, no, I don't care. Like as soon as I got there, I gave him a hug and a kiss, and stuff. And it was fine. So the last time I saw him that he was doing really well was Thanksgiving of 20. And I was not allowed to in the facility to eat with him, but I brought him cookies and we had some cookies and we talked and everything. And I had no idea that we had a problem. And 2 days later, Sunday morning at 6 a.m., I got a phone call from the facility that he had a fever. He had vomited. His breathing wasn't good. Well, the first thing I thought was he had COVID. They told me they were sending him to the hospital. And it turns out that he did not have COVID, but he had a partial bowel blockage, which I then was told that is not uncommon with wheelchair-bound and very sedentary people. His motor skills had gotten worse and worse because I would notice that when his foot would fall off the foot pedal, he could not lift it back up. Somebody had to. He could use his hands to eat. And one of the scariest things about Lewy Body is they constantly had speech pathology checking his swallowing. Well, then I find out, because you lose the ability to swallow. And like they had given me all these books. Well, he may need to be put on a feeding tube. And I'm like, oh my God. Well, it never came to that. So he had this partial bowel blockage. They admitted him to the hospital. But by the time he was in the hospital, his white blood count he had a raging infection. He was septic. The next morning, I was told he had pneumonia. They started doing more tests, and they're like, "No, we're not concerned. We're giving him these massive antibiotics. Okay, fine." Well, Monday night, I got called back to the hospital at midnight because his blood oxygen had dropped down to whatever. And they wanted to put him on a ventilator. And I said no, because that was totally against his living will. Actually, so was a feeding tube, because I had already said to them, that will not happen. Here's his wishes, not mine, but never got to that. So I got a little bit of attitude from the nurses at the hospital. "I can't believe you won't put him on a ventilator." I said, "No, you can't believe it." "Well, maybe you should." Then I get like annoyed, and I'm like, "Maybe you should read his living will. I'm following his wishes. Don't ask me. This is difficult enough." But so the next day, Tuesday, his blood oxygen came back up, but he was never really responsive again. He did grab my hand a lot and stuff. And thank God, they allowed me to stay from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. Only one person. And my sister came down, she would cook dinner for me. And I had some very close friends, like only one person was allowed in the room. And there was a director at the Amavita, Dr. Cruikshank, who had left the facility, had become very close to Dawn, and they allowed her in because of her credentials as a physician, as a doctor. So if I wasn't there, she was there. Mm-hmm. And Tuesday night, I got a phone call from the pulmonary surgeon to tell me that his right lung had collapsed. And they said to me, "We can try and reinflate the lung." They said, "But I just want to tell you that he may not survive the surgery. He's in such weakened condition. And even if he does, the lung may recollapse. But the decision is yours." And I remember my sister and my brother-in-law were here, and I just was sitting on the phone because it was like at 9:00 at night. I had just gotten home, and I'm like literally shaking, and it was on speakerphone, and my sister is just like, who can say anything? And I just sat there and I said to the doctor, "No, you're not doing that to him. I can't do this to him. That's not fair." And then I have to say, the doctor said to me, "You made the right decision." He said, "But it was yours." He said, "I couldn't." He said, "I wish all of our family members were like that." And it was like probably the worst thing I ever had to do. And the next day I met with their palliative staff, and he ended up in hospice house, Hope Hospice House, which was a absolutely magnificent facility. There's only 11 rooms, and each room has a lanai. Well, we're in Florida, so in December, not that he knew it, and at that point it was allowed 2 visitors. So it was my sister and my dearest friends, Marilyn and Jim, and, we just tag teamed, and I was there probably, I would go home at 11:30 at night, feed my cat, take a shower, get a couple hours sleep, and go back there. And on the 7th of December, I don't know why I got up at 3:00 in the morning, and I went back, and I just sat there and I fell asleep, like with his head in my arm. We stayed there all day, and they had given me this book on what to expect at the end. And I didn't want to read it, but my friend and they said, "You should read it." And I did. And a lot of things that, about the modeling on his legs and this, that, and the other thing. And I have to say, the nurses, I don't know how they do it, but they all deserve halos because they were phenomenal. And I'll never forget one of the funniest things. And I said to my husband, because he was on, I didn't realize this about hospice. They don't give you injections because they don't want any pain. So any medications they put inside of his mouth, and they were giving him oxycodone, I guess, as often as they would look at his breathing. And if it was every 20 minutes, they would give it to him. And then they put a fentanyl patch on I think it was on Sunday, and they came in because he would get restless. He never spoke. He didn't really open his eyes. And, and the nurse came in and put the medicine in his mouth. And I was sitting there, and my arm around his head was here. And I said, Don, For 30 years, we've shared everything. And now when you're getting the good stuff, you're not sharing it. And so the nurse says, quick, kiss him. It was just really cute because you know what? You do need to lighten up and stuff like that. And they had said to me, they said, and this was like the last day on Monday, and I think they knew. Well, I know they knew. And they said, whenever you leave the room, and that includes, it was my sister was there all morning. She left about 3. And then Dr. Catherine came. And then another friend of mine, Marilyn, came later. But they said, whenever you leave the room, even to go to the bathroom, you need to say, Dawn, it's Micky, or Dawn, it's Catherine, or Dawn, it's whoever it is. I'm going to the bathroom, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I will be right back. And they said, because you may think it's Huey, but he will decide who is here when he takes his last breath. And I went, yeah, right. So my sister had been there. She left around 3. Catherine had been there. And I think the nurse and Catherine were talking, and they could see it was getting closer. And at about 5:30, she called my friend Marilyn and said, if you want to, I wasn't privy to the I found out afterwards. I think you should come over now. Well, because of COVID, when she got there, she texted Catherine. Catherine left the room, and she had to go through the COVID screening to come in the facility. And Catherine said to Dawn, it's Catherine. I'm going to go outside because Marilyn's here. She wants to come in and, joke around with you and hang out and stuff. So I'm going to leave you 2 lovebirds alone. And we'll talk to you in a couple of minutes. And she left the room, and he died 5 minutes later in my arms. And it was just the 2 of us. And because the nurse came in, Catherine must have said something, because when the nurse came in, she put her hand up, and Catherine and Marilyn were outside and came in and put a step and said, he's gone. And then she did leave both of them come in the room, and we spent about an hour there, and that was that. And, but it was, let me tell you something, because when he was in hospice house, I remember the social worker coming in saying, well, have you made arrangements? And I'm like, for what? Was I naive, and was I dumb? And then my friend Marilyn said, I'll take care of it. And I mean, I don't know what I would have done without these friends and my sister, because I was, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, anyone who's caring for someone with dementia is going to go there. And Don lived 2.5 years after he went into a care facility. And basically 3 years after his diagnosis of Lewy Body. So I have to say, the Lee Memory Care, when it was first mentioned to me that this really isn't Alzheimer's, we don't believe, it's Lewy Body. And I said to them, well, they said, well, Alzheimer's could drag out for me. I said, really? And they go, probably 3 to 5 years. And it was basically just under 3. So they knew what they were talking about. Yeah. And I think that that's really important to get to. There's so much not known about this disease. And for me, I worked in my husband's office. I have an X-ray license. So it's like I did have some kind of background. So it's very difficult to understand a diagnosis that is not concrete. Here's a blood test. Here's an X-ray. Here's this. Because it's all, Lewy Body especially, is all completely subjective. And, but they were right.
Wow.
And that's where we are. So now it's 8 months later. And I actually last month in July, I had a celebration of life in New Jersey and put some of his ashes in the river right in front of where we lived. And, couldn't do anything in December. because it was COVID. And so I waited because it was just 2 days after his birthday. And it was more or less a private, it was just family and then some very close friends. It wasn't a big like funeral. I mean, because Don had been a dentist in the town for 40 years and he knew hundreds of people, but it was just, you know, and then with COVID, you just, you know, I just wanted to keep it small. So, so now I'm just trying to pick up the pieces.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about how life has been for you since his passing. But before we do, I kind of want to go back. My heart hurts for your story and so many people's stories who, one thing after another, from unsolicited, unhelpful opinions of, you know, getting a divorce and being questioned for not wanting a ventilation to really just getting a diagnosis and being sent on your way, maybe with a prescription, and that was all. Like, did you even know what, like initially the diagnosis was Alzheimer's disease. Did you know what that meant? Like, did they give you any place to go, get information, get help? Like, did you know what you were in store for? Or they
did not.
Yeah. So how did you get that? Because I get the impression from your story, you'd go every 6 months, you'd get maybe a refill, a little check-in. Like, how did you learn? Because your story also is really complicated just with his behaviors and his symptoms and trying to figure things out.
I did nothing for literally 4 years because he was originally diagnosed in May of 2014. And as I said, I was so naive. Like when the doctor had said this, I mean, I literally thought, okay, well, one day he's going to wake up and not know who I am. We had patients that were like that. And they, you know, Don would say, well, let me talk to your wife or husband, whichever. And that's not my wife or husband. And I wrote, but they were just sweet little old people and they were just really wonderful and stuff. But this was completely different. But for the first 4 years, maybe 3 years, there was very little going on that ever, you know, Alzheimer's, I think I read, you know, oh, people can live 25 years, you know, and it ranges from this to that and all this. So you don't really think much about it. And you're like, well, I'll figure it out as time goes on. But my husband was not one of the people and have gone through subsequent, like when I came to, all of the information that I got was when I came to Florida from 2018 on. And it started with Lee Memory Care and they recommending some support groups through a group that we have here called the Alvin Dubin group, which is the local Alzheimer's group on the Alvin Dubin. They're wonderful. But in the beginning, like I just, I think a lot of doctors don't know a lot about Alzheimer's and don't know about other dementias, because there are other dementias and there are lots of other things that come into play. And I don't profess to know, but once I went to Lee Memory and they started giving me books and I read everything I could and I haunted the internet to find out stuff about it. And I had no idea. Lewy Body with the entire, motor skills, because not all Alzheimer's patients don't typically end up in wheelchairs and they can't move and they can't swallow and stuff like that. That's not something that's normal, you know. And Don with his, I mean, I had to go online to find things to put in his chair. And then you'd get a PT person that would say, I think I saw something, and I used to call them water wings, and I buy them on Amazon. They were these little wings that would support him, and then I'd buy little pillows to put in, because literally he couldn't hold himself up. And these aren't typical for, in my opinion, for Alzheimer patients. So I really think that it's so sad, because a lot of, well, at least I felt adrift. And even some of the Alzheimer's, these other dimensions have different aspects to them. Like, he was not what they consider an elopement risk. He was not wandering. Like, he didn't need the tracker on him. His was motor skills, and it was this aggressive behavior. He had delusions, and he would tell me, you missed the plane. Like, I would walk into his room and he goes, where were you? And I was just there yesterday. And so I did learn, you don't go, what do you mean? I was just here, oh, you missed the plane. I got caught in traffic, Don. Well, we were there. We were in Las Vegas, and I was looking for you. And we hadn't been to Las Vegas for 20 some years. And then he was telling me about a friend of his who had been deceased for 15, 18 years. And then one time, and I think what was happening is he started watching television, and he would then, like, one time he said to me that I missed the plane to, Alaska, because he was on this boat and they were catching crabs. Well, then I find out that he's watching Deadliest Catch, and he really thinks he's on this boat. I mean, it was just, I have to say, because the doctor said, well, just be glad that he's living in this delusional world, as opposed to there are bugs and spiders and snakes crawling all over me, which could also be a delusion, which could be horrific. Yeah. And thank God he didn't have that. But
I was going to ask if he had any of those visual hallucinations that are common with Lewy bodies, like little bugs on them or anything like that.
He would not on him, but when I went there, he would start to take stuff off of me, and stuff. And I never, but most of his, delusion. But that being said, in the last, 8-10 months, I wasn't allowed in the facility.
Right.
So I don't have firsthand knowledge of what happened, but I do know that every week he was tested for swallowing. And I do know, I believe part of the problem which he ended up with, the bowel blockage, is he didn't drink. And I think the reason why is because he did have Parkinsonian symptoms and his hand would shake. And so he was a very proud individual. He wasn't going to have water going all over the place. And, it was,
Now, how did you know, because of his symptoms, it would be pretty easy to increase his agitation or not be able to redirect the conversation and calm him down by telling him he's wrong or that's not true, when trying to use reality? How did you know not to do that? How did you know to adjust your approach?
Well, I'll tell you right now, not just early on, because I had basically no help, and I found support groups not great for me and stuff like that. I found a lot of your videos, and I was one of the first people on your groups, and when you would do your thing, and I remember hearing, go along with it, become part of what they're saying, because you're not helping matters any. And then I was like, really? Because I know that never helped. I would always, first of all, when he was living at home, that's when we used to get into arguments, and he would say something to me, it was totally off the wall. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Don, you don't make any sense. And all that's doing is that's going like this. Right. That's a snowball heading downhill. And so when it would be it was and having conversations with somebody like that is not easy. It's very difficult. But then after a while, you kind of get into it and you're like, oh, yeah, I missed the plane because of traffic. Or my car broke down. Whatever comes to mind, it doesn't really matter, because it doesn't have to be the truth. And it did bother me at first, because actually one of the aides from in the original facility had said, I said, I can't lie to my husband. I said, we never had a relationship. And one of the things that he was very important to him through his entire life was honesty and truthfulness. I said, I don't have a relationship where I lie to my husband. Mm-hmm. And they're like, just look at it. It's a fiblet. It's not a lie. You're not hurting him. A lie is something that hurts, and this doesn't. Yeah. So, you need to search out help. And I'll tell you right now, a lot of your videos, and one of the things I liked about them is because they were short. Because if I didn't feel like sitting down and listening to an hour-long video.
Right.
Like if I would listen to something that was under 10 minutes or read something it was great. But you need to be told these things, because if somebody doesn't tell you, you're not going to figure them out yourself.
Right. Exactly. And I love that you got that information, the fiblet, compassionate lie. I like to say choosing kindness over truth. It's like, a lie is intentionally meant to deceive somebody for your benefit. And when it comes to dementia and something like what you're describing with your husband, choosing a compassionate truth or fiblet or compassion over truth is to relieve their distress. They are in distress, and in their world, this is their reality. So like joining them, we're not even dealing with the same concept of lying anymore. But I know that's a hurdle for a lot of people to jump over, whether for religious reasons or just for, this has not been our relationship. We tell the truth all the time. And it's like, in this case, it's causing him a lot of stress.
Yeah. And I finally got to a place where, I had to say is that, like, the only thing that matters is him and how he's dealing with this, because I can deal with what I have to deal with. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I know that you got to take care of yourself, and that's a very difficult thing to do, by the way.
Yeah.
So, but I did learn it to a certain extent. I mean, I think a little bit is better than none. I did over time start doing a little bit more things, and I have to say, I think COVID, whereas it was a horror show and still is, but there are positive points of that, at least as it related to my life, because it gave me the ability. It didn't give me anything. It restricted my ability to see my husband 5 or 6 days a week in that care facility, because I didn't listen to anybody who said, you really are not helping him and you're not helping yourself, because I wasn't buying any of that,
Meaning they were saying you shouldn't visit him as much when there
Correct.
were no restrictions, and you were like, I'm going no matter what. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And they did. They kept saying to me, go and do something for yourself. Go away for the weekend. Go where?
Right.
Really, and stuff. But I live in Florida, so I went to Disney a couple of times with friends for like 2 nights, and I would schedule it so that I saw my husband drive there, come home, see. But I understand what they were saying, and I understand the entire thing of you have to look out for yourself, and it is true.
Yeah.
But when you're in the middle of it, it's really tough. So COVID, in that respect, made me back up and start to take care of myself, which I think was really good when it came to the fact that I lost my husband. So we didn't have another number of years where we could just hang out, whether it was in a care facility or not,
Now let's talk about that and transition there. How are you doing? Like, your husband, it sounds like you said, was your whole world. You put him first, and now he's gone. How has this transition been for you?
I think in the very beginning it was numbing, and then when you lose a spouse, now you get involved in the legalities, the stuff, the attorneys, settling the estate, and all that entails in each person's life, be it more or less complicated. So for the first couple of months, I think I went through life in just a blur. It's starting to ease up now, but I will tell you, even now, I have to force myself out of the house. I had to force myself to eat right, because after he died, I would have like a whole bag of potato chips for dinner. Well, guess what? That's not one of the better things in life. And I just finally said, you're going out for a walk each, a couple days a week. And I took up golf a year and a half ago. So a little late in life, but who cares? I'm not going to go. It's fun. And I've met some women, and it's been a little difficult for me because I don't have a large support group. I mean, I have my sister who lives about an hour and 15 minutes away from me, and just a couple of very close friends. That's it. Like no one else. I did not have the large family, the children, the grandchildren. Don has one son who lives in Seattle. We see him every 2 years. He has a brother in San Francisco. Don't see him either, like maybe every 2 years. It's not like there's somebody that can help.
Yeah.
But, and that makes it a little more difficult. So I think that you do need to sit down and say, I have to do something, and I can't. I did. I spent time in my bed until I had friends of mine that said, oh, no, you're not. Get out.
Those are good friends.
Yeah. So I think I'm doing a lot better. I will say that Hope Hospice had, and I still have a Zoom meeting, started out weekly, and now it's every 2 weeks with a bereavement counselor and some books. Sitting down and reading books is, not so much. One of them is, one of the ones that I found to be very helpful is a little book that was recommended to me by my grief counselor, and it's called Healing After Loss, and it's just 1 page each day, and it's an amazing book.
I'll link to it in the
hold on 1 second. I'll tell you who's the author of. Healing After Loss, and it's Martha Hickman. And the way it's set up, I don't know if you can see this, but it's 1 page.
Little short. Mm-hmm.
This lady who wrote this book lost her daughter at, I believe, 16 years old. They were on a family vacation, I believe, in like the Grand Canyon, somewhere in that area out there. And they were on horseback touring, and she fell off a horse, hit her head, and died.
Oh my gosh.
I can't even imagine. So after her journey, she wrote this, and it is set up. It starts January 1st and goes to, but you can, and they tell you can pick a day. So it was in, I think, the end of March when I got the book. It had been recommended to me. I ordered it on Amazon, and the day I got it, that's the day I started. And so I bookmarked on certain things, and there was a passage that I really liked, and so at his celebration, I gave a copy out to everybody. But it's just like anything else. There's paragraphs that speak to you and others that don't. I think that that book really helped me because there were things in there that this lady wrote, and I'm like, wow, that's how I feel.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so I'll be sure to link to that specific book in the description below. Any last words of advice, recommendations, whether it's for a Careblazer in the middle of caring for a loved one with dementia, or perhaps somebody like you whose loved one has already passed? Like, any last words you want to leave?
The only thing that I would really say is that trust yourself. And trust your own gut instinct. Actually, I don't even know if you can see, you might be able to see, I have a, up there, and that was one of yours from a long time ago, and it said, trust yourself. And it said, and it's been there for years, maybe a couple years. And one of the things where paraphrasing your last one, don't ever take advice from people that don't have to live with the outcome, because too many people try and do that and give you advice. And
you gave 2 good examples of that. The doctor that said to get a divorce, and the nurse that basically said you should ventilate your husband. Well, you don't have to live with that outcome.
Exactly. You need to know. And you know what? don't even listen to your kids. I mean, like, well, I didn't have any, so I guess that's not really right, but trust yourself. Go with your gut instinct.
Yeah.
You just need to know. I think that you can't live with somebody for 30 years and, not know what they would have wanted. I mean, nobody was going to turn my husband into a guinea pig. That's not fair. And we discussed this years ago when we were hale and hearty, and neither one of us wanted that. And it is hard. Oh my God, but you know what? You will get through it, and stick to a couple of close friends, because
and what I want to highlight too, several things that I think could be really helpful. The living will, in a moment when your husband's in the hospital and sick and like things seem to be declining quickly and providers are like, you need to make a decision really quickly. It was, even though it may have emotionally been difficult, you could know he would not want the ventilation. He would not want the feeding tube. So there's really no, like, as hard as that situation is, there's not much to debate because you guys had that living will and you know what he would have wanted beforehand, regardless of what any of the other providers were saying. So like, that's something great that you had. The other thing that I think was a really big key takeaway is your healthcare team, the people taking care of your loved ones with dementia, make a big difference. Until you got to that awesome memory facility in Florida, you hadn't even gotten a recommendation for a support group. You hadn't even gotten a good diagnosis. You haven't gotten a full workup. Like, let's check somebody's hearing, like anything you can do to benefit somebody's functioning. Like, so those two things were, I think, big takeaways I don't want people to miss from hearing you talk.
I think that wherever you live, I didn't know anything about, just because I happen to live in Lee County, it was called Lee Memory Care. I don't know of in other parts of the country and other areas and stuff, but check it out, see if there is something. And because I did not have any of that, nothing for 4 years. It was, here, take this medication, and that was it. And I think that looking back on it and now seeing things that are on the internet and seeing that there are support groups. Well, my husband would have never gone to like a support group, because there are support groups for for both people, and stuff like that. And and also what you're going through with a spouse is very different than what you're going through with a mother, a father, an aunt, or an uncle. And understand that too, because that dynamic of your spouse is very different than the dynamic of your parent. I'm not minimizing the other one, because I lost my parents, but totally different situation. And that's where a lot of the, and well-meaning, acquaintances and stuff, oh, I know exactly what you're going through. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, 12 years ago. Yeah, no, I don't think you do. And they mean well. It's not that. And I think that I got to the point where I just said, okay, fine, thank you. And then went home, and if I needed to, I'd scream into an empty house, just kind of for your own sanity. But I think it's really trust yourself, because you're the best person to make this decision. You almost have to look, he wasn't a child, but his care is in your hands.
Right.
And his or her care, but it was, in my case, it was like I had to do the best I could until this day. I guess one of the most important things is, and I've said this a lot of times, is that when this is over with, and for me it is, I can sleep at night. I did the best I could, the best possible care that was within my realm to give him. And for everyone, that could be different, varying things. I know there are people that had said to me, you should have kept him at home. Why didn't you take care of him? There were a lot of reasons, and there's no sense going into it. But when you have someone who's aggressive, you can't even get care people. So, I had people at the care facility that wouldn't deal with Don because he would use some rather abusive language. I had one family member at the care facility get up in my face, literally this close to me, and said, you better stop your husband from using that kind of language around my wife. And I'm like, Would you like to tell me how? I mean, I just looked at him. I was like, we're all in this boat together. Would you like to tell me how I'm supposed to do that? You know, and stuff. And it's like, I don't think people say things and they don't understand what they're saying, you know, but, you know, and I just, it's a tough way, and everybody that'll probably watch this understands, but the living will and all of your legal documents, if you're watching this, it's probably a little too late, but then for yourself, I have a group of ladies that we get together, and do you know, after I lost my husband and some of the things that we went through, like, you know, you needed certified copies of your marriage license to send to Social Security. Well, how many people after 30 or 40 years can even find these documents? So we have this thing, and we call it educational thing, and it's like, but really think about it. If you are maybe taking care of a parent, think about yourself. Do you have your documents in order, and for you and your husband and stuff? Because so many people, I have friends of mine, they go, you know, what you went through, it really spurred us on to update.
Right.
Do it. Make sure that it is, you know, it is so important.
Absolutely. So. Micky, thank you so much for sharing your story, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for everything you did for your husband. I know that wasn't an easy journey, and I'm glad to hear you have a good support system out there with a good group of friends, and hope you have some fun on that golf course.
Yeah, and thank you for everything, because you really helped me along the way.
Oh, I'm glad you had some faith in me, so it's my pleasure for sure. All right, so thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you to everybody watching.